Hey, you guys. Thanks for joining me today. So, in case you haven't seen yet, the couple topics that I wanted to go over are how to set up some jig locations over in OpenBuilds Control. In UGS, uh, it's not quite as simple, but if you set up a macro, it is kind of the similar steps using their macro features. Um, but in OpenBuilds, they've set it up configured to be just a few buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up, and then we'll jump over into OpenBuilds real quick. I was trying to get the chat to work right and overlay onto the video today, and it worked fine when I tested it an hour ago, and now it doesn't want to work right. So we'll see about that. Yeah, I had it so it was going to pop up on the screen and look real nice, but I guess it doesn't want to play friendly with me today. And then after that, wanted to show a few tricks on how to set up the Gerbil settings on most hobbyist CNC machines to be able to carve your 3D carves a lot faster, especially over on the X-Carve, which has some greatly reduced settings in there that you can easily just about double the speed of your finishing pass of the 3D carve. Hey guys, Shockwave, Craig, and Haldren. So as OpenBuilds, does anybody else run OpenBuilds? Let me know. All right, guys. So hopefully you can hear me well enough. Ooh, that probably went really loud too. Looks like my. There we go. That's probably better. Yeah. So here we'll screen share real quick. That way you can see what I'm doing over here. All right. So over here in OpenBuilds, we my CNC should be connected up here. Let me make sure that's plugged in and turned on. There we go. So once I connect to that, it should allow me to get to all the controls over here. Yeah. So now we're going to go unlock the alarm on that one, and then all the buttons over here appear, right? Yeah, Craig. So I have an ESOL subscription as well. I know I talk about it a lot, almost as if I represent the company or something sometimes. But no, I pay for my ESOL Pro as well. But I just download the G code from it and then upload it, open it in OpenBuilds and use the OpenBuilds as the sender, right? And I don't use the sender portion of ESOL. It has, again, you're going to see on here one of the features that you can do in here that ESOL just doesn't support. You can kind of manually type in some of these commands in ESOL and do it that way, but it's not the best solution. Oh yeah, great timing too. As I open it now, it installs an update. Perfect. So over here in OpenBuilds, I guess I'll give you guys a quick little run through, very quick. But when you open a G-code file in OpenBuilds, it'll preview it down here below with. We need one that is not for a 3D print, because that's going to look really weird. Actually, if we go back to the desktop, there might be one for my, yeah, that same one I ran last week, right? So this is the 3D carve of a moon shape with a taper on the top, right? So, yeah, over here we have this 3D preview that you can move around and see all the toolpaths a bit more clearly than the one in easel shows the toolpaths and the lines of all the lifts and the plunges and all that stuff. But what you also have is I could set X, Y, and Z zeros anytime I want to, which is not an option in easel. You got to set it in their methods, right? You set, if you have a probe, you can set Z zero using the probe in easel, and then you would set X and Y in one swift step. But over here in OpenBuilds, I have the option to even set Z0 manually just by clicking this button, and then I can set X and Y0 manually, independent of each other as well. And then the last video I discussed how to set up a corner probe. That way you can tuck it up to the corner of your workpiece and be able to probe X, Y, and Z0 that way, right? But a lot of things that a lot of people like to use like a fixture on the CNC. In that case, you kind of use like an L-shaped bracket on the front left corner of the machine. And I don't have a second camera set up yet, but we'll use this as my example. Yeah, let's say this is this is the work area of the CNC, right? And this is your front left corner where you could justify a piece of material. So one thing that I would do is place a piece of MDF, screw it down or clamp it in place. Or even glue it in place potentially right here, and then you would cut a smooth face on it. Now you can do that in the front as well to give yourself an L-shaped corner, and then when you go to carve your workpiece, one after the other, you tuck it into that corner. And that kind of, if you do this jig setup, that kind of reduces the need at all to use the corner probe that we discussed, right? So once you identify that point, that exact corner of where those two pieces meet up at, you can save it into OpenBuilds and UGS. It actually saves it onto the CNC machine itself as a G28 function. You can actually have more than one. So let's say you set one up in this corner and then use some sort of locating pins or a different jig that you mount that you've got a way to locate it every time somewhere else. You can save that as a second jig location as well. And you'll see that in here as well. I refer to G28 as the main one, and then G30 would be a secondary. But they both function identically to each other, right? So the way that corner one that I was talking about, once you could mill the face of that MDF, that way you know exactly where it's at. And once you mill the face, you could save that point where they meet up at as that G28. And the way that we would do that is you would home the CNC and then jog it over in a position of where you want that corner to be. And then you would set X and Y zeros, right? So let's say we home this machine, which I can't actually do because it doesn't have motors hooked up to it. But we would then jog it over into position and find that exact corner that we want this jig location to be in, right? So let's say I home it, and then I slowly just now jogged it up in a position over there. And then once it's in that position where I'm going to, the next carve I have set up is going to use that position and cut the faces of these two pieces in a little circle right here in the corner. That way we can always fit a right angle of the stock in there. And I'll show you that in a photo in just a second over here. As I pull that up to kind of give you an example of how that corner jig location would work. And then once we get it into position for that corner jig, we'll go ahead over here and we can click this little expansion button. And that gives us the option to set your predefined positions, which if you're typing this in manually, like you'd have to do it in easel, you would have to, again, jog it over into position and then go into the console window over there and send the command G28.1, which you can do in here as well, sending manual codes in this console by sending that G28.1, and that effectively saves the current position as an offset from the home as that new jig location. So next time you want to use it, you would simply home the machine and then come over here and click go to that G28 position. And it's going to immediately jog directly over into that exact corner, right? So let me show you an example of that the CNC corner fence real quick. And you can, so some of these examples that I'm going to show you are 3D printed, while others you can CNC yourself, like using a piece of MDF. So Pawn CNC sells the files to 3D print these yourself, and I think they sell the 3D printed pieces as well. And I know, who is it? Ben Myers. I think this is probably one of his listings over here, but he sells them as well in the 𝐭𝐫𝐤𝐤 group a lot, or at least he did a while ago before he switched over to Onefinity. But you can, if I can type CNC right, that might help too, right? But yeah, you can 3D print your own, like these ones here show, or carve them out of MDF, right? And there's Etsy listings where you can carve them. Here's, I think, the Ben Myers one here, right? And it's very easy to set up in any software to lay this sort of thing out yourself. So this corner jig I was talking about, this one here is 3D printed. So you want to make sure that your 3D printer is properly calibrated and everything before you print this out. And then this particular one matches the bolt holes of this particular wasteboard. So you would just make sure that it's parallel to your X or Y, hopefully both, and then mount it in there. And you've got this corner that you're going to butt up your workpiece to for when you want to use it, right? Yeah, so Howard, have you set up your the G28 yet on there? I see that you said that you used the L-shaped corner one and OpenBuilds. Let's see if this pop-up is going to work here. Oh, nope. Yeah, Kevin, I mean, you can do that. You can kind of position your corner jig down in there so that when you home, it does match up. However, I mean, the caveat to that is one, you'd never be able to go outside of that, and two, it's possible that you can have issues where if your design is at all outside of that, then it could cause crashes, right? Let me head back over here. So here is an example from the Ben Myers woodshop from Ben Myers, where he also carved out a portion of his fence to be able to fit his XYZ corner jig. And that's a good idea to be able to identify that position at first if you need to. But then once you have that jig location saved as a G28, you no longer need that. The thing is, a lot of people, there's a good majority of people that aren't aware that this feature exists, right? So I could see why that would be included in these here. Let's see if I can open this by itself. There we go, and zoom in better. And you can see in these examples, he sells, I think these are the files that he sells, where you can purchase the specific hole pattern clamps, corners for the two different, either the 𝐭𝐫𝐤𝐤 or the Onefinity that he was selling, right? Not that he sells, but that he uses a lot. So here's the main jig location will be this G28, and then you can save a different one. And this is a good one because all the holes will help justify it in the exact same spot every time going forward. So you can save this as a second jig location. Or in my case, I have a couple fixtures that I mount that actually have like a quick clamp on them that allow me to put down a piece of stock, clamp it in place, and then with just the ratchet action of the clamp, it releases. I could pop it out and put a new one in. So I was carving like a slotted hole for almost like a biscuit in these pieces, 200 at a time. So rather than having the biscuit joiner in my hand the whole time and slot these, I was doing them with the CNC itself, basically, right? And that allowed me to put a piece down, do that step, and then as soon as I got the piece off the CNC machine, I was gluing and nailing them together. And it kind of helped the process flow work a lot better as opposed to hand biscuit joining them all, right? Because as I'm gluing and nailing this one together, the next one's on the machine running. And the cool part about OpenBuilds is you can quickly just click the play button and it'll run the carve again. And then carve's complete. I pop it out, put a new stock piece down, and then click carve again. And then I would do 200 at a time, and then sure enough, a month later, I've sold all those, and I've got to make another 200. So having the jig location saved over here as the G28 function really really helped locate that jig every time, right? So using this corner location that we talked about over here, you can what I would do is essentially screw down your corners like this, and you can use a two-piece one here so that if you have to tile, you could simply unscrew the front one and take it off. And then you would have to get it back in the exact same spot in order for that G28 to be perfectly right on for the next time you use it. And that's where maybe locating pins or making sure that the tolerancing of your fasteners there is pretty tight, right? To help hold it in the perfect position in the future. And then once you have that in there, like I said, you come over here and you select G28 and it just sends that command, the same as if I was to manually type it. And then when I want to go to it in the future, I would hone the machine, which I can't do on this one, but we'll go ahead and pretend like it's out of position somewhere, right? So it's over out of position, and I would click right here and go to predefined G28. Yeah, so Craig, that's kind of what I was getting at here, and so it jumped. I don't know if you saw that, but let me jog it over again real quick. Let me reduce this jog speed. When I click go to predefined, it quickly runs it over there into that position, right? So it repositioned it to that 7 and 0 position, right? And that's an offset from the home. So once you get it there, then I would click set zeros again, and then I would run my carve. When you do this, you can see how low my z-axis is. It does matter where you z it at. So when I do this normally, I would home first. That way the z is at the top point. That way I don't drag it across the workpiece when I go to use it, right? So can you set up more than one G28? So OpenBuilds is set up so that G28 and G30 are right here together, and those are the two defaults. There are other ways to use, I think G54 and a few other ones that work extremely similarly to this. And if you go over to James Dean Design's channel, he has a video where he sets up a corner jig, but he used the G54 function, I believe, over in his video. And that's a little bit more user involved, but he's using UGS, where you don't have these quick buttons. You've got to either manually type it or set up macros. And what macros are, they're basically customized user-created buttons, right? So we can jump into that real quick here. We'll cancel that one. So over here, there's a tab in OpenBuilds called macros. Let me open up UGS real quick here in a different window. And I'll show you in UGS as well. Since those are the two most common senders. I guess G sender is catching on pretty well too, due to its additional functionality. Now the problem, the caveat with additional functionality is more settings for users to manipulate and mess up. I like OpenBuilds because it does have a lot of functionality without a lot that the user can really mess up. And UGS is very similar in that regard as well, that it's along the same lines as far as functionality and user setup. Let's see if I can get that open here real quick while I go through the rest of OpenBuilds, if it wants to load for me, UGS. All right. This is one of the things I don't love about UGS. So I've gone over here and I've navigated to the folder that it's in my downloads folder. In order to open UGS, you've got to navigate all the way through to this bin file, and then run this executable every time. Now you could save this as a shortcut to your desktop, maybe you're putting in a different folder somewhere, but unlike the OpenBuilds one where you actually get a program that I can just go in Start menu and type in OpenBuilds and I get it right there, you can't really do that in UGS, unfortunately. Here we'll launch UGS and I'll show you that one in a moment. Because it's very similar setup. So over here in OpenBuilds, we can create a macro. And basically we could set in the G28 like this. And that's basically how you would have to do it in UGS. You'd have to create your own macro. And G28.1 is the code that you would send to save a location. And then to use that location, it would be just straight G28 would move it to that saved location. Does that make sense? So over here in OpenBuilds, you can basically create your own buttons, and we'll call this go to L fence. We're going to call it like the L, because usually it's an L-shaped fence we're going to use for this. And you can select your own icon. The default is this !1. Let's see if it's going to love popping up there. And you've got a handful of these ones here to choose. I believe there's, what is the other one called? It doesn't quite. I mean, you can scroll through and find one that works for you. This one here works. Just something that helps you, identify what that is. And these are single color. The color you select on the next page there, right? And you can kind of set that icon to a different color that way. If you've got more than one set up using the same button. And here, if you want to, a lot of people use a Bluetooth wireless keyboard for this too, and you can set up keyboard shortcuts. You can set up, like I have a device called a Stream Deck that I use I've been using actually to edit videos, but the intention of it as well is that you can use it for streaming and press buttons to do different functions. And you can set up the functions of that to, at the push of one button, control this macro as well by using these keyboard shortcuts. So we'll apply this macro, and now we've got this one here set up that says go to L fence, and I've got no keyboard shortcut set up. And we can do the same thing here. Like I said, I use a clamp jig in the building of these. They're boxes that there's solo cup holder boxes, and they have a Sharpie in them, right, with a little label on the front that actually just use vinyl to adhere to the front. That way I'm not even carving it, right? All I'm carving is the slots. I adhere the vinyl to the front and then clear coat it on there. And the clear coat holds it so well that the vinyl never peels off. So that is what I was talking about slotting the biscuit joints for. That's how I hold the sides together, is with the biscuits. And here we can set up G30, and you could, like, if you wanted this to say G30 in the title, you can do that as well. We'll select a different icon to use, and you can see there's some silly ones in here, right? And this is held in a directory, so you could actually add your own icons to this as well. I'm just going to kind of pick one that's already here. Yeah, we'll go with that. Sure. And then set a new color here. We'll go red. And you can see the new one is right there. Now, somebody else asked about how you would go about deleting these, right? So we'll show that real quick. It's really simple to delete these. All you have to do is open that gear icon, and to edit it, right, click that little tiny gear icon, and then click delete macro, and it goes away. So if you made one and you typed the wrong code in there, and you just made a new one, and now you've got two, but one doesn't work right, you can just click that button and delete it. Or you could click that little gear icon, which highlights red when you hover over it, which is kind of interesting on the one that's, I chose the red color for. But you hover over that gear icon, and it shows you right in there. So if we jump back over here to the console section, you can see the commands I've sent recently are that G28 and going into that G28 position, right? So if we come back to the macros and I click this one for G30, it sent that command, it moved my spindle over, and we can see in here that it moved it to G30, right? So these are basically, the way I have them set up right now, it's just sending one single line of G code. You can get quite intricate in there and have it send multiple lines, right? So getting to know what the G codes do are going to help you in setting up those lines, but you could have it move to position, automatically set the X and Y zeros, and do that in one click of a button by using the macro, because right now these other buttons up here will only move it into position. Right, so using the macros, if you use the macros kind of the way that James talks about setting up the G54, you can have a lot of positions set as an offset from home, right? If you wanted to. So you could, I guess, use that corner clamp. And let's say you've got a good one that I can think of is doing circles, and you butt them up against the two pieces of the clamp, right? So you bring in a circle that's a larger diameter, and you butt it up to the two pieces of your corner, and you want it to go use the center point of that. If you can save these jig locations so that it goes to G28 and it goes up to a certain position, and now that can be a macro button. So it moves there, and then you just click set X and Y 0. And if you're using the exact same size circles, but like say you're using a few different diameters, that would be a good way to auto center them as long as they are consistent and identical to each other. That'd be a good way to use a few different size of round stock like that, right? And be able to quickly and easily find the perfect center of it. Oh, we're already at 107? I guess I started late. That's okay. And then, so we've got UGS over here, and I'll show you real quick on that. So for setting up a macro over there, we've got this little button down here on the bottom left is the default. We have to go up here under Windows. Is it under Windows? Use UGS a ton. You know what? Again, that James Team Design video, I believe he shows setting up the macro. Yeah, he shows setting up the macros for this as well. So I would check that out. So over here under Machine, there we go. We have the macros button, and you can edit macros right here. If I click the right button, not Setup Wizard, sorry. We'll try that again. Edit macros. And we can define more, add them in here, and set up additional ones. Let's see if it lets me add. There we go. So we had to assign a name to that first one. All right, so we can assign this one the same thing, G28, or I think we want to call it what, L-fence. There we go. Go to L-fence, G28, and the command here is G28. And you can, again, set a description so it pops up here as well. Let's do that real quick. L-fence home position. And we'll go ahead and apply that. And we should get the button right here showing up. There we go. So since my CNC is connected over here, I got to disconnect it from OpenBuilds. And then these buttons become clickable right here. When I click that, I haven't homed yet, so it doesn't really like streaming to it. So let's unlock the machine and then click that button, and then we sent the G28 command. So again, for saving the jig location, you'd have to send the G28.1. You could set this up as buttons, but I suggest not setting up the 0.1 version as a button because it's just too easy to click that button to override the previous location. So what happens here, when I do go in and I save that jig location, it's saving it onto a chip on the CNC itself. And it doesn't matter if you let that CNC unplugged and not use it for a year and a half. That jig location is still saved on the CNC. It doesn't matter if you change to a new computer, it's still saved on the CNC. So I mean, the only time that's really going to change is if you change out your brackets and you need to reassign it. You would just send that same command. Like let's say you had brackets that were super small and you want to change to a thicker one for whatever reason for more stability, and you put new corner fins on there and you need to assign it to that new position. You just send that G28.1 again and it would reassign to that new position. So if you do that and you override the previous one, well, you'd have to re-find it again in order to set it up for the previous one, right? In order to reconfigure it back. So back over to OpenBuilds. And here real quick, I want to go over a few things. So you used to be able to type in, just kind of as some house cleaning tips here that I recently learned. They updated OpenBuilds a couple of months ago, and there used to be a box over here where you would tell it what feed rate you wanted to jog at, and they got rid of that, and now it's this slider only. So basically before you had a slider and you had a number, and now you have a slider only. Now, I don't love how that doesn't tell you what the numerical value is. You have to know what your machine's max feed rate is in order to adjust that slider, right? When you close UGS, there we go. So you can adjust the slider. Now it's going to go at 50% of the maximum jog speed. So if we come over here to this, let me connect real fast, the 𝐭𝐫𝐢𝐚𝐥 settings tab, which should pop up here in a second. There we go. We can scroll through the 𝐭𝐵𝐢𝐚𝐥 settings over here in OpenBuilds and see what those are. So the max feed rate is separate for X, Y, and Z, right? So the max feed rate for this machine it's plugged into is 2000 in the X and Y, which those are almost always the same. And then Z, it goes a little bit slower at 500 because you don't typically need to jog down that fast. That's how you crash and damage parts, right? Break bits. So the 110, 111, and 112 are your settings for the maximum feed rates, right? Feed and plunge rates. So here, knowing that it's 2000 is the maximum for X and Y and 500 for the Z, when I go and use the slider, I would need to know that because 100% is 2000, 50% is 1000, 25% is 250 for the jog, or for the feed rate jog in X and Y. And then if I go to jog in the Z, it's going to use 25% of 500, right? So 125 would be the millimeters per minute would be the feed rate there. And if you are using inches, well, 𝐭𝐵𝐢𝐚𝐥 wants to operate in metric and millimeters, so that's why all these values are that way. And when you do change the settings, you are going to have to do it in metric. So even if you run the CNC using imperial and inches, all of these settings are in metric, so you'd have to do some conversions there, right? So this right here is where the second topic of the video that I want to cover was, if you really want your carves to go faster, you need to change this max plunge rate, and know what it is, because you really want to only use that faster max plunge rate for the finishing pass of a 3D carve, right? So if you increase this speed and you accidentally set a plunge rate higher for a regular carve where it's plunging straight down with like an end mill, you're probably going to lose steps in the Z-axis and potentially damage the workpiece or the bit, right? So keep that in mind if you do edit this setting. Now, the reason why I said it's going to be a huge increase for specifically the X-Carve is the X-Carve uses, so this machine it's plugged into now runs NEMA 17 motors, right? So these are really slow. My bigger CNC back there runs NEMA 23s, and it's actually also a belt-driven machine, so the X and Y can run really fast. And then, of course, it has a lead screw for the Z. So even the Z on that one can go, I have the Z set to, I think, 2000 on that one, and the X and Y set to about 18,000 millimeters per minute as my maximum feed rate for the X and Y, and then, like I said, 2,000 for the max plunge rate. So that's pretty fast, and that allows me to run, what's that in imperial for those that are, that's, my plunge is set to 78 inches per minute as the maximum plunge rate on that machine. Now, the X-Carve plunge rate default is 28.4, right? So I think it's 500. Or sorry, 19.68, right? So the same as this one. That's the default plunge rate. So the default plunge rate on my little NEMA 17 Fox Alien Massacre is at the same max plunge rate as, and that thing runs a tiny little spindle, right? It has the same max plunge rate as an X-Carve running NEMA 23 steppers and a router that's 10 times as strong. So there's really no need for it to run that slow, other than Inventables not wanting people to damage the machine when they first get it, right? So I would easily increase your X-Carve to 1,000, maybe 1,200 for this, and not blink an eye, right? That's an easy setting that you can change up to there. And if it's running fine, go even higher. And the thing about that is, again, there's another great, I'm going to keep on plugging James today. There's another great James Dean design video where he talks about how to tune these settings to find what a good acceleration and max plunge rate. So the next part of settings in here is the acceleration. You don't really need to change those, but his video does also discuss tuning those higher to really get a bit more speed out of the machine. As far as this, what I'm talking about here, changing the max rates is the key to getting those 3D carves to run a lot faster. So currently, if you have an X-Carve and you haven't changed these settings, if your plunge rate is set to anything higher than 19.68, you're just really using some wishful thinking there, and it's not actually going to carve that fast. And then you'll have fictitious values for your carve time that's telling you it's going to carve significantly faster than it really will, because these are settings on the machine itself. So if I send a carve to this machine and tell it to carve faster than this, the machine itself reduces it down to this and says, nope, that's my max. So it doesn't matter if I tell it to carve at 200 inches per minute. The max feed rate is 78.74, and the max plunge rate will be 19.68. Now, I'll show you real quick with a bit why this matters. That's a little bit easier to demonstrate. Grab some bits here. Show you that real quick. So as you do a 3D carve, let's see if I have an example over here somewhere. Ooh. This is a great example here, right? 3D print. So if we take this 3D model here, and we're just carving the relief at the top, as it's going up and down over each of these step overs, every time it's moving in the Z axis at all, it only goes 19.68. So even though it's moving left and right, anytime it is going up and down, it effectively slows down that feed rate to match whatever the plunge rate setting is. So when you do set up a carve, if you really want it to go fast, you need to, it doesn't matter that your feed rate is set to 78. It's going to only go as fast as the Z-axis when the Z-axis is moving, if that makes sense. So, so that's really the key is to set your plunge rate higher in easel, but also if you're using easel or Carve Core, Vectric, or Fusion 360, but also to increase what your max setting is as well. And I'll show you how to do that real quick over here in easel 2. It is along the same lines as this, and that'll be a good spot for me to show you how to potentially use the G28 commands over in easel. So over here, there we go. Once it loads out, yeah, so we can go to machine and general settings, and then machine inspector right here. There's also a hotkey for this where you can press Control-Shift-D, which is what I usually do. That way I'm not, clicking around and navigate to this. So once it's in here, we will have to disconnect from OpenBuilds to show you this. 𝐂𝐚𝐫 should grab command of my CNC machine. Or just unplug it and plug it back in real quick. Or 𝐂𝐚𝐫 might not want to connect to this machine, I guess. Yeah, so I guess 𝐂𝐚𝐫 doesn't want to connect to this machine right now. I haven't set it up on this computer yet. So we'll go back in there real quick. General settings, machine inspector. And right in here, you can send a line to the CNC as well as view the settings in this bottom portion here. Let me do this real quick. We'll set up this machine real quickly. So if you're not aware, anytime you do a machine setup, if you're not actually running one of these, the X-Carve or Carves, do not select these. It will change some of those settings that I just pointed out, those GRBL settings on your machine. And for the purpose of this, just going through real quick, and we'll set this machine up real quickly here. And now we've got a new machine set up, and it should allow me to connect and get that green carve button. Hopefully. Maybe not. Maybe not today. We'll see. But regardless, we go over here to 𝐂𝐚𝐫, and like I said, under those general settings and machine inspector, and you have that area where you could type in a command. So like that G28, I would type it in here, and that is how you'll be able to use that G28 command in 𝐂𝐚𝐫. So it's not quite the simplest way to do it, because you can't set up macros and save them as buttons within 𝐂𝐚𝐫. You have to manually type it every time. So right here is where you would use that G28 jig location that we talked about earlier within 𝐂𝐚𝐫. And then when this is connecting to a CNC, which I'm not quite sure why it won't connect to this one right now, but it might have to do with having 17 different USB devices plugged into one computer. But you can go over here to settings, and it will show you what those GRBL settings are, the same ones that I just showed over in OpenBuilds, right? So those same settings will populate here, and you would send a line like if I wanted to change that $112, which is the speed of the z-axis, I would type in $112 equals, and like I said, the default for X-Carve is 500. So if I want to change that to 1,000 or 1250, I would simply type in $112 equals 1250 and hit enter, and it would send that line to the CNC, updating those settings. Now this bottom bar here won't auto update. You have to click this little refresh button, and then it will update those settings on your CNC. I guess I need a 20-foot long USB cord so I can connect to that other CNC over there. Usually when I run it, I'll set up my computer right here on this extra area of the table, and the USB cord for that CNC is really short. It just goes to right there. So I don't have that one connected right now. So that's how you would effectively set up a jig position as well as editing your settings. Was there anything that you guys wanted to talk about today? Any questions or anything like that? You can go over a few projects if you want to. Or I can talk through some more of OpenBuilds over here. Yeah, so some of you guys So one issue that I've seen recently is with people trying to convert to OpenBuilds is, so OpenBuilds is set up to run the default baud rate for 𝐭𝐫𝐢𝐚, which is 115/200. Now, almost every CNC is also set up to run on that same baud rate. However, there was some issues with some of the earlier models of the X-Carve Pro, and in order to combat their communication troubles, they went ahead and reduced that baud rate just a bit. And by reducing that baud rate, it no longer works with some of the senders that only run 115/200. So you'd have to go in and manually change the baud rate for that particular machine. Every other machine that I've seen connects up just fine. So since we are back in OpenBuilds here, and I've got a few more minutes to go over some stuff, let's talk about the wizards here, right? And once you connect to your machine, you have access to a few more buttons than what you see without it connected. And we have a surfacing flattening wizard, which allows you to quickly set up it's going to create a G-code file for surfacing your workpiece. So you just enter in your bit diameter, like my surfacing bit is a 22mm wide surfacing bit using those carbide inserts. And you can set the silver percentage to what you want it to be. Really, anything below 40 is fine. So if you want to do it quickly, you can set it up to about 40%, and that isn't too bad, right? Then you set your feed rate to what you want it at, and the dimensions of what you're surfacing, whether it's the actual wasteboard of the machine or a workpiece, you can set that up in here as well. And then the depth at which you want it to remove, right? Once you Z0 it. The depth you want it to surface to. So I typically set this to about 0.3 to 0.4 when I run a surfacing pass on a workpiece. And if you have a spindle that has RPM control, this is how you would enter that as well, right? And if you wanted to have automatic vacuum controls, you can set that up as well in here. So once you click proceed, it creates the G-code file. And if we jump over here to 3D view, you can see the new, this is the toolpath it's going to follow. And here's the simulation of it going back and forth, kind of what we call mowing the lawn, where it does this parallel passes going back and forth from top to bottom. And then it's going to do that singular perimeter pass around the outside, right? So this was a really quick and easy way to set up a surfacing toolpath, right? So another feature that you see in here is this mobile jog widget, which I use all the time. If you were on my Wi-Fi network, you could scan this right now, and it would allow you to open this app. This basically it opens a website on your phone, and then you can jog the CNC around into position, which, like I said, how I have my laptop set up over in one corner, and it's not near the front of the machine, right? So I use my phone to jog it around and then come back over to the laptop to start the carve. And that's really convenient for the way that I have it set up on a larger CNC. If you do have a smaller CNC, this might not benefit you that much. Unless you want the computer to be inside the house and running a super long USB cable out, then you might find a use for this. Now, UGS also has this feature as well. They added this a while back. I want to say last July timeframe. They added it in theirs as well. So these two softwares they don't really copy each other, but they do kind of piggyback off each other from time to time with the different, what happens is users of one software will see the features in the other one, and then contact them and ask, feature request, can you add this in there? And they're like, oh, that's a good idea, we should add that. And that's typically where they end up kind of copying off each other without doing it on purpose. And then these ones here about calibrating the different axes. When you click into that, it has this pop-up, and it does use the OpenBuilds brand machine as the pictures here, but the same concept and following the process can be used with really any CNC machine. So what we do here is I follow this process and use like a straight edge metal ruler across this to be able to have a perfect line. And yeah, Bluetooth mouse works well if you can see the monitor from that far away, right? Like I'd have to turn my screen around, and the cable is so short. on my USB cable that it would be tough to do. Again, that's just kind of a caveat of my setup, right? But yeah, USB mouse and a USB keyboard as well is a good, or a Bluetooth keyboard as well is a good feature to have, right? So I would mark this point, and then you tell it to jog the different directions. And as you go through this setup here, it asks you to mark it again, and then you just measure the distance and tell it how far you want it to move here, and move it, right? So it moves over that amount. And then you measure the distance of your two lines, and you would enter that distance that you measured right here, and it will automatically recalibrate your machine for you and save that data to your CNC machine. And then you can do that for X, Y, and Z. Z is a little bit more tricky because you're measuring the raising up and down of it, right? So it's a little bit more tricky to do. And again, if you do this process, like I mentioned, it shows in the second step how far to move it. The more you move it, obviously without crashing, the more accurate the calibration results are going to make your machine. So on that machine back there, it can move 48 inches from side to side, but I've got to be able to measure the distance, right? So I might only move it about 40 to 45 inches. But if I was to do that same calibration only 4.5 inches, and my measurement of the calipers was a tiny bit off, that same amount of measurement being off has a lesser effect over a longer distance like that. So it effectively makes the calibration more accurate. Again, it has to do with the tools you're using to measure as well. So I might prefer to use calipers as opposed to a long tape measure, which might not be quite as accurate, right? So just something to think about as you calibrate your machine. And then over here, you can set up your custom keyboard shortcuts. So we've got the default ones that are set up in here, and some more down below where you can change that step size. That's interesting that these settings are here that no longer apply. The decrease and increase step size used to affect that box that was in here, where actually I think it actually does select these selectable ones, right? So if I click apply and I use the plus and minus here, it automatically goes through and cycles through these different buttons, right? So that's kind of a neat feature there, is that you've got this keyboard shortcuts pop up where you can set these up. Now, UGS has a lot more options for setting up these keyboard shortcuts. So I'm a little jealous about that feature over in UGS, is their shortcuts are there's a lot more of them to do just to apply, right, than there are over here in OpenBuilds. But again, like I said, I think it has enough, OpenBuilds has enough user controllable functions without being too overly complex, right? So you've got the home button on the keyboard as well, which can I show you mine? I can show you mine. So on the keyboard here, I've got a home button on my full keyboard. I can just press home and it's going to home the machine. And for running the machine, it's a space bar as well as pausing, right? So running and pausing, if you double tap the space bar on accident, you're going to run and then pause, as opposed to run and then stop, because stop uses the escape key. So just stuff to think about as you're running OpenBuilds, and you don't accidentally press the escape key in the middle of a carve, or you can actually change it to an unused key, right? And I haven't saved it yet. It doesn't allow you to change it back while it's still in there. So anyway, we can go through here and assign those to new keys if you like, or complex keys, right? That is how you set that up. In the similar area where you set the keyboard shortcuts over in UGS, you also have another option in there to set up a game controller. Unfortunately, OpenBuilds is not set up to accept the game controller necessarily, but you could use the Windows settings and assign the buttons on your game controller to these keyboard controls and achieve the exact same functionality out of a game controller, like an Xbox controller that runs off of Bluetooth as well, right? So that's pretty neat that you can do that. I do, like I said, I do like how UGS has a little more customization to the game controller than OpenBuilds does, but hopefully they'll eventually catch up on that regard, right? And then this firmware flashing tool, I don't suggest going there and using it, but it allows you to flash to these different style machines, right? And again, it tells you right here, only use this when you're instructed by OpenBuild support. So I don't suggest, even bothering to open that up. It's not the same thing as flashing the 𝐭𝐫𝐢𝐚𝐥 settings or even the Arduino 𝐭𝐵L version. That's a whole different process. All right. So, and then this prepare USB flash drive for interface. That's also for the OpenBuilds black box products where you can run your machine using this touch interface without having a computer plugged into it. So you can plug in a thumb drive, and then this will read the thumb drive, and you can run your G code off of that without having a computer plugged in. And I've had people ask, can you convert an X-Carve to use the black box from OpenBuilds? You certainly can. It's extremely easy. It's just a matter of removing your controller and plugging in the new black box in the power supply to wire it up to your stepper motors, just like it is on the back of the X controller. And then you would have the same, functionality of being able to do offline controlling. As well as, having this little, I'll show you this thing real fast, but having this little touch, the OpenBuilds touch thing, it does tell you the readout, the same readout that it shows over here, right on the front of the machine. And yeah, it's pretty user-friendly to use that device, Yeah, Craig, so I went over the probe settings in the last live stream. I thought you were there. But here, I'll pull that up real quick and just kind of discuss it. So over here in the probing wizard, it may or may not default to the OpenBuilds one, because that's the one on the top of the list here. So you just want to go through and select either the Z touch plate if you've got a Z only. And then you just enter in your thickness here, and you're ready to go. You would just confirm position and then probe. So then in the future, it saves this value. So the next time you go to use it, you just open it, confirm position, and probe. And that's how you would use the standard Z touch plate. Now, if you wanted to use the XYZ, like that corner one there, this shows a picture of the OpenBuilds one. It also kind of shows it using the hole here, but the way that I use mine, it doesn't actually use the hole. It comes over and it touches off each of these sides and then the top area here. You do have to enter your end mill diameter when you go to use it, otherwise it doesn't touch off the X and Y properly. But you can, you've got, this one gets a little tricky where people get confused. There's two different gear icons, right? And this is the one where you enter in your specs for the probe. So this X offset is, that is this side over here, the thickness between the edge of the probe and where it butts up against your material. And the Y is the front offset from the edge of this probe to the edge of the material, right? And that's where this comes in. And then the Z offset is just the thickness of the top part of your pad there, right? So this advanced one is more setting up which corner of the material you're actually going to probe to. For the most part, these are rarely used unless you want to probe to a different corner. Like I said, they're very rarely used. So once you've set up your probe using these settings over here and you've got everything set up for it, and you enter your end mill diameter, you can click confirm position and probe, and it's going to probe the X, Y, and Z locations one at a time. Or you can also go up here and say, I want to probe X only, or Y only, or Z only. And the Z only comes in handy a lot of times for me, because once you set this up and you select your end mill size, it's going to touch off X and Y. And then if you want to use a V bit, well, now you know the corner position, and that's saved. But if you want to use a V bit, you then need to probe Z only, because you can't probe X and Y and Z with a V bit, right? So you'd probe Z only to the top of that. And if you wanted to do it like this, you can, or you can actually flip the probe over and use the backside when probing Z only with a V-bit, which is what I typically do, because usually I V-bit probe to the center of my workpiece. right? So this corner part wouldn't work that well, but when you flip it over, you can set it anywhere you want, right? So that is how I set up the probes in there. And of course, the third one here, the one that it typically defaults to when you open it, is the OpenBuilds one, and you don't have any settings anymore. Because what it does is it drops down in this hole and it measures your bit diameter itself. And then it comes over here and it touches off the X, Y, and Z. And since you're using the OpenBuilds one, it already knows what those offsets are because they sold it to you, right? So theirs is spec'd out to those settings and you can't adjust them. So, that's kind of where that comes into play, and it's pretty neat in that regard, that it's all set up for you automatically. All right, so that's how you set those probes up. I don't have the OpenBuilds one, even though I do have a work bee. Mine's actually not an OpenBuilds brand machine, so it's a little bit different. Anyway, the other thing here, you see the pop-up saying new. They added this new feature that allows you to operate in dark mode if you like that. The screen to be black instead of white, depending on if you like that sort of view. I don't. I kind of find it harder to read usually in the dark view, so I'm going to go ahead and bring that back. But yeah, that is how you would set up a probe. Now, if you are running a machine that has a spindle that has machine-controlled spindle speeds, you could go in there and manually turn it on using these things here as well, and set different speeds right here as well, right? And again, it uses percentages here because it doesn't know what your max RPM is. It's just using percentages, right? So that's that caveat there. You've got to kind of learn what these percentages are. Now, I talked about the slider here for jogging. You also have the slider here, which is the feed rate of the carve. So once you start the carve, this one grays out. You can slide the feed rate of the carve up and down from 200 to, I think it's supposed to be 10% if I can. It's tough to get, there we go, to get it all the way down there. 10% is the slowest of the feed rate that you can go to, and then you can double it so it's 200%, right? And then if you are using, like I said, that CNC machine controlled spindle, then you can adjust the spindle speed using this one over here. So it's called tool, but obviously tool means bit or spindle rotation, right? So that's how you get that spindle speed percentage during the carve. This is how you adjust them. Now over in OpenBuilds, you have to use a bunch of little buttons for plus and minus, and I don't think that that's very user intuitive. I think the sliders over here are quite user intuitive to set that up. So let's say you were to set up a carve in easel, for example, and you go to click carve and it doesn't start the spindle right. You can stop that job, come over here, manually turn on the spindle using these buttons, and then start the carve, and the spindle is going to stay on throughout the job. The caveat to that part is it's not going to turn off automatically at the end. So if you do that, if you do have that problem, you will want to go in easel and adjust your machine settings and set up the correct spindle type and control method, right? So yeah, that just about covers everything I wanted to cover, and a few things that I guess Craig asked about. We'll see. Let's see if it works now. My pop-up for the comments still isn't working. All right. So I went through it and spent like an hour setting up this overlay display so that it would show the comments on the screen, right? And then now when I try and use it, it doesn't work. All right. I guess I'll have to play with that more. Maybe I'll do a pretend live stream middle of the week just to test that out more. Anyway. Yeah, so hopefully that helps you out, Craig, with setting it up. I mean, it's probably that settings button, right? Those two different settings buttons if you are using OpenBuilds, but I think you're trying to use easel. And the thing is, easel doesn't, you could steal the individual commands and like maybe, I don't know, save them in Excel where you could copy and paste which commands to send one at a time in order to have it probe properly using the console section and probe with those manual commands. However, there is one brand that sells a XYZ probe, and they sell software for it called Triquetra. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's the but they sell a this one here, right? They sell this XYZ probe, and they sell software that they include in this thumb drive, but I believe you can order the software only from them. And what the software is, it's a Google Chrome add-on. So again, you'd have to be using Google Chrome for it to work, and install the extension, and then you'll have a button up here to press in order to use their probe. And basically what that button does is it kind of overrides the easel display, and it does those commands for you. And it sends all these commands to the machine through like a back door into the easel overlay. Yeah, so here you can purchase that. It's an Excel spreadsheet with the software. So they integrate to each other, right? So that Google Chrome add-on actually pulls from this spreadsheet where you'd have to enter in your data, because again, it needs to know the bit diameter and all this, this other stuff for your probe specs. Yeah, so that if you do want to use easel, that would be the best way to be able to use an XYZ probe with easel is this software that this guy's already made. It's 20 bucks for the software, or like I said, you could switch over to OpenBuilds, and then the setup in there is not 20 bucks, right? It's free. Yeah, so you made 2 XYZ probes today. So you did. That's something else I guess I could touch on too, right? Over in OpenBuilds, it's really only set up to run one machine. So if you've got multiple CNC machines, or in your case, multiple XYZ probes that might not be identical to each other, you have to reconfigure your probe to set up that. And UGS is the same way. So that's just kind of something to think about. So if I kind of get around that by, on one machine, I'll run the Z probe only. And on the other machine, I'll run the XYZ probe. And that allows me to kind of save 2 different configurations, 2 different thicknesses of 2 different probes to use, right? In case they don't match identically. Another option is to potentially run OpenBuilds for one machine, run UGS for a second one, and then run maybe GSender for a third CNC machine, and then have different configurations all set up and saved in those different softwares. So yeah, so that's kind of a neat part about easel, how easel does save your settings to the machines over there, the different machines that you can set up and save, right? So I don't mean to cut this short at all. I guess I've already run over it more than I plan on going. But I will be back on here Friday. I appreciate all you guys for checking in and hanging out with me a little bit today, and liking the video before you jump out of here. I really appreciate that too. But I'll be doing this again next Friday, and we'll pull some more topics. I have a few emails that came through with projects, so we might go through projects. And then pretty soon as well, I want to go through and talk about how to set up an Etsy store for your CNC projects. And I've set up a few of them, and I spend a lot of time in the shop just streaming YouTube videos, right? I'll stream people who talk about, for example, when it came time to set up my Etsy shop, I played on my phone and listened to it in headphones, some YouTube videos that other people who, set up multiple shops and coach people, and people pay them for their services to set up shops before I set up mine. And that really did help me with making sure that everything in there is set up in a way that makes sense, and that users see your shop as somewhat professional. The problem with Etsy too is when we go to set up the shop in there, if you set up too professionally, some customers will be turned off by an overly professional store. So you do need certain aspects to be set up in certain ways. And yeah, I can't wait to share that with you. There are some really good tricks to be able to get traffic to your store that a lot of people aren't using. Yeah. Anyway, so if I don't do that one next week, then we'll do that the week after, based on what sort of input I get from you guys. Again, my email address is in the description below, I think, but it's cncseth@gmail.com. It's the easy one that I set up to kind of correlate with this, with the YouTube stuff, Anyway, hopefully I'll get the pop-up with the comments working next time, because that was a really neat feature, and I was happy to share it with you guys, but it didn't work out. So until next time, guys, appreciate you. Have a great weekend coming up, and yeah, share your projects with me too on the social media that I probably know you through, right? Facebook or Instagram. All right, take care, you guys.